Good morning, YouTube. Warbles on a lot here with the conclusion of the outsiders on Afghanistan.
Doing that because India has a role to play in Afghanistan, but it's all for India. It's about balancing Pakistan, and of course the problem with Pakistan now is that the influence that the United States has is lessened because Pakistan is now able to access much more engagement economically from China. China has a strong interest in a lot of development in Pakistan, particularly the ports of Pakistan, and building connections, rail and road connections through Pakistan as part of its Belt Road Initiative. This is very scary for India, and it means that the pressure that I think President Trump was trying to apply on Pakistan by roping in India to help by helping Afghanistan, I think may well come back to have some negative repercussions.
Okay, well, let's get your reactions to something that David Kilcullen, he's a prominent counter-terror expert. This is what he said, his sense about President Trump, how he's envisioning a long-term, even permanent presence in Afghanistan.
He didn't mention it in his speech, but one of the things that a US official said last week when a journalist asked him, how long would you guys expect that you're going to be in Afghanistan? This official said, well, how long have we been in Korea? And I think what Trump is trying to do here is to reset this away from the idea that they surge a set number of troops in, they achieve something and then they leave, to more of an idea of what are we going to do that stays there permanently and is sustainable for the very, very long term. And for obvious political reasons, he's not going to spell that out in his speech. But I think that's what we're seeing here is an attempt to shift the entire framework of thinking about Afghanistan away from time and troop numbers to more of a more permanent presence.
David Kilcullen there. Samina, is Kilcullen right?
I think he might be right, but my concern is that the assumption that if America comes into Afghanistan and stays here for a longer period with no end date in sight, somehow the situation would be a lot stronger for America than it's been at the moment. Let's not forget, Afghanistan is not Europe. Afghanistan is Afghanistan with its own culture, and a culture that's not peculiarly just limited to Afghanistan, like the cross-border movements, even cultures that moved into Pakistan, into the subcontinent, and backwards as well. So while Americans might be thinking of staying there, the fact that they may not be able to continue their policy is also something that we need to look at. So yes, the intention is there, but I think the intention is also to make sure that they really take care of the problem in Afghanistan, and that means both ISIS and Taliban, and to negotiate with Taliban if needed. But ultimately, I think Americans would want to get out.
Now, Samina, you're in Pakistan at the moment. I'm sorry, I've got to heighten things up here. But now, in Pakistan, you're in Pakistan, so that must be, what, 4 o'clock in the morning?
Maybe just getting to
well, thank you for getting up for the interview. Straight. I thought I'd get up early at 5. Now, you're in Pakistan. It received a fair amount of attention in Trump's speech. How's the government there reacted to the news that they'll be under more pressure from America to stop harbouring these jihadists?
I think it's a very mixed attitude. At one level, the Foreign Office has given a statement saying, we're not happy with that. The Parliament has also been giving messages that this is not acceptable to us. And even the Chief of Army Staff says, we want friendship and we don't want money. It's not a transactional relationship. But there is a sense that Pakistan is being pushed into a corner, and that's where I agree with John, this whole idea to engage India more in the rebuilding of Afghanistan, which at one level has been going ahead for some time. That's really attracted attention, because if we go back to what happened in 2001, Americans built a very strong relationship with Pakistan to get rid of Taliban on the at least understated assumption that India would not be allowed to have a strong say in what's happening in Afghanistan. So now to basically put Pakistan on notice and say more or less, you've been very naughty and we're going to shake you up. And we're going to get India into the picture, and India is going to be in Afghanistan. It's really giving Pakistan a feeling that India and Afghanistan are being supported by the United States to squeeze Pakistan in. If you think about the regional politics, the fear of encirclement has really been at the heart of Chinese foreign policy for a long time. Even Indians have talked about it, string of pearls. And now Pakistan is a beginning to think that somehow Americans are becoming a very strong party to encircling Pakistan, mainly because, again, what John referred to is that the Chinese have established very strong relationship with Pakistan in continuation of what they have done in the early 60s.
Samina, we are out of time. There's some rare optimism here, but thank you all very much, Samina.
There we go, out of time. And they didn't mention some of the most interesting things about this new Trumpletonian doctrine of how to win in Afghanistan. No time limit. They've suggested that means they might be there for as long as they've been in Korea. It also means they might pull out next week. They said they're going to change the rules of engagement so they're no longer going to restrain themselves. If they think there is a suspected insurgent sympathiser, they will strike that location and collateral damage doesn't matter anymore. So they're going to shoot the shit out of the landscape. That's the plan. Send another 4,000 people over there, and instead of trying to conduct a modern, high-tech, high-impact ballistic war according to the rules of the Geneva Conventions, Unkle Spam's going to go over there and fire off every shot in the locker. When I say in the locker, I mean all of the munitions which are currently in that theatre of operations. Once they've gone Winchester, I suspect he's going to pull a George W. Bush and he will announce the mission is accomplished. The Taliban have been blown away and he'll pull everybody back out. However, contradicting that point of view, he also mentioned that he's not going to go to war in Afghanistan without securing commercial financial recompense for the excited states in the form of minerals. So he wants to mine Afghanistan after capturing it. So without using any kind of a restrained military campaign, they're just going to rely on high technology and firepower. And they're going to do this because the Taliban has refused to go away. And who is the Taliban? The Taliban, in most of 2001, and for a couple of years before that, the Taliban had been the United Nations recognised government in Kabul, who'd been the winner out of all of the Mujahideen, and the Mujahideen had been funded and armed and trained by Unkle Spam to fight the Russian or the Soviet puppet regime which was in Kabul. The reason the Taliban are really difficult to beat is because the US State Department got the British Department of Defence, or War Department, whatever they call themselves, to employ by contract veteran Special Air Services Regiment warrant officers and sergeants as consultants to instruct in insurgency tactics to defeat the counterinsurgency tactics of the Soviet puppet government in Kabul. And it's really difficult to defeat any insurgent force that's been trained by the British SAS. And that's really what the Americans have been up against. The Australian SAS did better than the American Special Forces because the Australian Special Forces SAS were trained by the British SAS back in the days of Malaya. But the Australians didn't do really well because the Taliban had read the British SAS playbook much more recently than the Australians had. So yeah, our fellas walked into ambushes. The Americans walked into ambushes. The Taliban's still there. They still own the place. It's not called the Graveyard of Empires for nothing. I don't know whether Tronald Dump's going to get any mineral concessions out of sending 4,000 people to bomb the shit out of Afghanistan. I think he's just going to make America even more unpopular. Because when you kill somebody's family because they live beside somewhere where there was an insurgent or an insurgent suspect, you turn the whole village against you. That's just what happens. That's how it works. And the point to remember is that calling somebody a terrorist just means you're calling yourself a loser, because a terrorist is a loser's word for anybody who employs tactics, weapons, and strategies that the loser has no effective defense against. You can't put a guard on everything that society cannot afford to have attacked if they think somebody's feeling like attacking it. There's not enough armed guards in the world. So anybody who is so pissed off that they decide they just want to go and attack random things that society can't afford to lose, that's not a defence. That's not something you can defend against. The word terrorist was invented by Joseph Goebbels in 1942 to describe the British RAF Bomber Command aircrews who had commenced deliberately incendiary bombing German city centres and dormitory suburbs. He said they were terrorfliegerinnen. And ever since then, anybody who's called anybody else a terrorist has lost the conflict. It's a fact of life, you know. I can't do anything about that. And let's face it, to the people who are living in Syria under the US Air Force and British Air Force and Australian Air Force and French Air Force bombs, our air crews are the terrorists because they are sitting on top of the gravity well where they can't be shot back at, and they're blowing the shit out of the landscape to terrorise the people who live there into submitting to the political will of NATO. One man's terrorist is another man's hero and freedom fighter. Life's like that. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.